Viewer discretion is advised.
It began like any other Friday night in Los Angeles. Studio lights humming, cameras rolling, laughter echoing across the soundstage. But beneath that glittering surface, something electric stirred, a tension that no one could name yet, but everyone could feel. Bill Maher adjusted his tie, glancing at the cue cards one last time. The audience was alive, restless, waiting. Tonight's guest wasn't just another celebrity promoting a film or cause. He was a symbol of tradition, rebellion, and controversy wrapped in royal silk. Prince Harry. When the doors opened and he stepped into the light, the applause was deafening. The kind of applause that masks curiosity with admiration. Every smile in that room was polite. Every cheer slightly too eager. It wasn't affection, it was anticipation. With that effortless charm he'd mastered long ago, half regal, half rehearsed. His stride was confident, yet there was a flicker in his eyes. The kind that comes from too many cameras, too many judgments, too many nights spent pretending you don't care. Bill extended his hand across the desk. "Welcome to the show." Smiled, his tone gracious. "Thank you for having me." The meeting of two worlds, one born from freedom of speech, the other from centuries of inherited silence. The studio lights glared, reflecting off polished glass. Somewhere off stage, a producer counted the seconds before the first question. The audience leaned forward, sensing this wouldn't be a typical interview. Bill began softly. "You've settled in California for quite some time now. Does it feel like home?" Harris chuckled lightly, eyes drifting toward the audience. "Home is complicated, isn't it? England was duty. California is discovery." Marlins of a murmur of intrigue rippled through the crowd. The answer was poetic, vague, the kind of statement that could mean everything or nothing at all. Pills nodded. Discovery can be freeing or unsettling. Harry tilted his head. Depends on who's watching. Line hung in the air. Bill caught it, the first spark. The conversation moved through safer waters, his family, his new life, his projects. But with each answer, Harry's tone sharpened. There was an undercurrent, irritation wrapped in civility, a quiet frustration that came from being both adored and dissected in equal measure. And Bill sensed it. He'd interviewed politicians, movie stars, presidents, but this was different. Royalty in exile, privilege stripped bare. The irony was too rich to resist. "So," Bill leaned forward, "how does a man who spent his life under scrutiny handle privacy in the land of cameras?" Harry smiled faintly. "By accepting that privacy is an illusion. Americans, more than anyone, live for the lens." Unsure if it was a joke or an insult, Bill's smile tightened. "You mean the American fascination with fame?" "Not fascination," Harry replied. "Obsession." The laughter died instantly. For a moment, only the hum of the studio lights filled the silence. Bill's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, but curiosity, the kind that always preceded confrontation. He shifted in his chair. "That's an interesting take, coming from someone who's had a documentary, a memoir, and a global press tour." Harry's smile faltered. "Sharing your story isn't obsession, it's truth." Bill's tone remained calm. "And how do you separate the two?" Harry hesitated, just long enough for the audience to feel it. Then, "You tell your story before someone else tells it for you." Bill's leaned back, hands folded. "Fair enough. But when your story insults the people listening, they tend to answer back." Something changed in the air, a current, a pressure. The audience didn't move. Harry's posture stiffened, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Are we talking about storytelling or judgment?" Bill smiled faintly. "In America, they're often the same thing." Zoomed in. The camera's jaw flexed. And somewhere deep in that audience, everyone knew the first punch had just landed. Sanctions that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed. It breathed. The air inside the studio thickened as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Bill didn't rush to fill the void. He let it linger. He'd learned long ago that silence could be sharper than any question. Harry looked down, then up, his expression tightening. "You Americans do love confrontation, don't you?" Tattered. A few nervous laughs. Bill smiled politely. "We call it conversation. It's kind of our thing." The words hit with precision, a journalist's scalpel, not a comedian's jab. Harry's tone shifted, less casual now, more defensive. "Well, I suppose it's easy to call it that when you're the one holding the microphone." Bill tilted his head. "You've held a few microphones yourself, haven't you?" The audience reacted, a low, collective ooh. Harry forced a smile, but his fingers drummed against his leg, rhythm betraying his calm. "It's funny," Harry said, trying to regain control. "You invite me here to talk about understanding, empathy, global unity, and yet all I hear are accusations." Bill leaned forward. "I'm not accusing you of anything, Your Highness. I'm asking why you sound like you resent the very people who gave you the fresh start you wanted." Bishop's face hardened. "I don't resent anyone. I just think America's culture of constant self-promotion can be exhausting." That word again. Exhausting. It echoed through the studio like a dropped glass. Bill smiled thinly. "You realize you're saying that on television, right?" Unfinished. A few laughs. Broke the tension, but it was nervous laughter. Everyone could sense the collision building. Class meeting democracy. Composure meeting candor. Harry adjusted his jacket. "I'm here to speak honestly, that's all." "And honesty's good," Bill replied smoothly. "But when honesty turns into condescension, that's when audiences stop listening." Harry's eyes flashed. "So you only want honesty when it flatters you?" Jang didn't blink. "No, I want honesty that acknowledges where it's coming from. You're not a man who clawed his way up from nothing. You were born into everything. That's not a crime, but it colors your perspective." A faint gasp rippled through the crowd. Harry crossed his legs, chin slightly raised. "So I'm not allowed to have opinions unless I've suffered enough for them?" "You can have opinions, but when your opinions punch down, they hit harder than you think." The words lingered like smoke. For a moment, Harry said nothing. The camera caught the faint twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked toward the audience, seeking sympathy, perhaps, or escape. Then, quietly, maybe Americans are just too sensitive. The entire studio froze, didn't move. For a split second, you could hear the sound of a breath caught in 1,000 throats. "Too sensitive," Bill repeated softly. "Interesting." Harry leaned back, mistaking calm for surrender. "You can't deny it. People here get offended at everything. It's political correctness gone mad?" Bill finished for him. The audience stirred. Bill's smile was gone now. His tone was steady, deliberate. "That's a strange thing to say from someone who's sued journalists for mean headlines." Discharged broke out, but it wasn't kind laughter. It was sharp, cutting, collective. Harry's face went pale, then red. "You think that's funny?" "I think it's ironic," Bill said. Terrorists Harry's voice rose. "You don't know what it's like to have your family attacked every single day." Bill didn't flinch. "No, I don't. But I do know what it's like to face criticism and not run from it." The audience roared. Applause, cheers, energy surging like a wave. His composure fractured. He looked around, bewildered, betrayed. "You're twisting my words." "I'm quoting them," Bill replied evenly. "That's different." Revenge felt hotter. The room felt smaller. The conversation had mutated into something raw and uncontrollable. Leaned forward, his voice trembling. "I came here for dialogue, not to be ambushed." Bill met his gaze. "You came here for validation. There's a difference." Hush swept across the studio. Somewhere, a camera zoomed in tight on Harry's face. Every twitch, every flicker of indignation broadcast in 4K clarity. And in that, Unbearable stillness. He said it. Quietly, almost under his breath, but clear enough for everyone to hear. Dismissed. Do you know who I am? The air left the room. Every head turned toward Bill. Every camera froze. Every producer backstage whispered the same thing at once. Oh no. Bill exhaled slowly. Yeah, he said at last, voice low, almost tender. That's the problem. The words landed like shrapnel, tiny, silent explosions that tore through the air. Do you know who I am? A line that was never supposed to be said aloud. Not here, not in front of the cameras. Submitted. No one spoke. Even the studio lights seemed to hesitate, flickering slightly as though afraid to interrupt. Bill Maher sat still, unreadable. Then, with a faint smirk that carried both disbelief and disappointment, he said, Yeah, I know exactly who you are. The audience leaned in, their curiosity sharpening into hunger. Bill continued, each word calm, surgical. You're a man born into privilege, sitting here criticizing a country that gave you refuge, a platform, and a paycheck. That's who you are, right now. The line sliced clean. Harry blinked, his face tight, pride flaring. You have no idea what I've been through, he snapped. Bill's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Then tell me. Enlighten us. Because from where we're sitting, it looks a lot like someone confusing inconvenience for struggle. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not laughter, not applause, just sound. Raw, uneasy sound. Harry leaned forward, his voice trembling but defiant. I served in the military. I've lost people. I've had my life picked apart since I was a child. Bill nodded, slow, deliberate. And that's real. I'm not dismissing it. But pain doesn't erase privilege. It just makes it more complicated. Sheriff's explanations, Harry's expression cracked. Not fully, but enough for the cameras to catch it. That tiny flicker between anger and understanding. The dangerous space where emotion becomes ammunition. You think you can sit there, Harry shot back, behind your desk with your lights and your audience and lecture me about privilege? You've never lived under global scrutiny. Bill leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You're right, I haven't. But I also didn't ask for sympathy while cashing in on the attention I claimed to hate. Michelle erupted. Applause, cheers, the rush of adrenaline that comes when someone says what everyone's been thinking. Harry's eyes flashed. You're twisting everything I say. I'm clarifying it, Bill countered. You said Americans are desperate, classless, egotistical. You said we lack decorum. I'm just trying to understand how that fits with your decision to live here. Sideline's insomnia was split, half gasping, half clapping. The tension wasn't just thick, it was intoxicating. Harry's voice rose. You Americans always do this. Always assume you're right about everything. It's insufferable. The boos started almost instantly. A low rumble, swelling from the back rows like thunder. Bill held up a hand. Let him finish. The audience went quiet, though the silence now carried the faint edge of hostility. Harry inhaled sharply. You talk about freedom and equality, but this country is drowning in division. You idolize fame, worship money, and call it ambition. And when someone points that out, you call them ungrateful. Bill stood now, slowly, his voice steady as stone. We are flawed, yes. We argue, we fight, we fail. But at least we do it out loud. We don't hide behind titles or tradition. That's not arrogance, that's honesty. The applause was deafening. Harris rose too, their eyes locked across the desk. The camera framed them like two opposing forces, one built from birthright, the other from belief. Think freedom makes you better? Harry's voice cracked slightly, the royal calm dissolving into anger. Your politics are chaos. Your media's a circus. You're no better than anyone else. Just louder. Bill smiled faintly. Louder, yes. But that's the point. We don't whisper, we roar. And we don't kneel to anyone. The audience cheered. Long, sustained, defiant. Clenched his jaw. Maybe I made a mistake coming here. Bill's tone softened, almost pitying. Maybe you did. But you're here now, living off American opportunities, building American deals, raising American children. So maybe show a little respect for the country that let you start over. That line hit him hard. You could see it, the flicker in his eyes, the tightening of his hand against the chair. Pride collapsing into something darker. Humiliation. You don't get to tell me what to do, Harry hissed. Do you know who I am? Beach gasped again, a second time, heavier now. Bill's smile vanished. His voice dropped into something cold, final. That line might work in Buckingham Palace, but here, it doesn't mean a damn thing. A stillness swept the studio. Deep, dangerous, sacred. And just like that, Harry ripped off his microphone. The metal clink echoed like a gunshot. Bill didn't move. You're really doing this? Harris stood. I don't have to sit here and be disrespected. Bill's voice rose, steady, commanding. You're not being disrespected. You're being challenged. There's a difference. Welcome to America. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, chants. Raw energy exploding through the room. Harry turned, fury burning through his composure. You think this makes you look strong? You're a bully. Michelle shook his head slowly. No, just someone who's not afraid of crowns. Harry froze, his lips trembling with words he couldn't quite form. Then, without another sound, he turned toward the exit. The cameras followed. Every step, every shadow, every heartbeat. As the door swung shut behind him, Bill turned back to the audience, exhaling deeply. And that, ladies and gentlemen, he said quietly, is what entitlement looks like when it's confronted. Oppressed, the crowd exploded in applause. But beneath the noise, something else hung in the air. Not victory, not satisfaction. Something heavier. Jiang themselves that they had just witnessed history. Pensions after Harry vanished backstage, no one breathed. The applause faded into something hollow, an echo of shock, disbelief, and fascination. Bill Maher stood still at his desk, eyes fixed on the empty chair across from him. The microphone cord dangled loosely, swaying like a pendulum between confrontation and consequence. Seriousness, a control room, a producer whispered, "Cut to commercial." But Bill didn't look ready to move on. The cameras stayed on him, the lights catching the faint sheen of sweat on his forehead, the tremor in the air that comes after a storm. He exhaled slowly. Well, he said finally, breaking the tension, that went about as well as a dinner with Piers Morgan. Laughter erupted, nervous and relieved. The audience needed it, needed something to fill the silence Harry had left behind. Bill adjusted his jacket, but his face was still hard, unreadable. You know, he continued, his voice calm but edged with fire, I don't mind disagreement. I encourage it. But what we just saw wasn't disagreement. It was entitlement under pressure. The crowd murmured in agreement. This show, Bill went on, has always been about honest conversation, about giving people the space to say what they think, as long as they can handle someone thinking back. The applause swelled again, louder this time. Brightness. Behind the scenes, chaos. Producers huddled in whispered arguments. Assistants scrolled frantically through social media, watching clips explode in real time. Hashtag Harry Maher trended within minutes. Headlines formed before the show had even ended. Off American talk show, Relegate W meltdown on live TV, Crimson Har dismantles privilege in prime time. In the green room, Harry paced like a caged animal. His publicist pleaded in hushed tones. "We can control this," she said. "We just have to spin it." But Harry's face was crimson, his jaw tight. "He humiliated me," he muttered, "on my own terms, in front of millions." Outside the door, security hovered, unsure whether to escort or to protect. Back on set, Bill turned serious. The laughter quieted as he leaned forward, voice dropping low. "Let's get something straight," he said. "I don't hate the man. I don't even dislike him. But respect isn't automatic. It's not a gift you inherit. It's something you earn. Every single day." The camera cut close, Bill's expression hard but sincere. "And when you come into this country, a country built on rebellion against inherited power, you don't lead with superiority. You lead with humility." The crowd stood. Applause thundered like applause after a verdict. Bad waited for it to fade, then continued. "This isn't about a prince or a comedian. It's about something bigger, about the moment when privilege meets accountability, when the crown meets the mirror." His words were deliberate, measured, the cadence of a man who knew exactly how to turn chaos into meaning. Then, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, he looked at the next cue card. "Anyway," he said with a dry half-smile, "up next we've got someone who actually likes America." The audience laughed. Tension broken, the rhythm restored. The music swelled. The red light above the camera blinked. The show went to break. Harry sat in the dressing room staring at his reflection. The makeup around his eyes had smudged slightly, tiny shadows of exhaustion. His publicist stood by the door, phone to her ear, whispering to someone on the other end. "They're spinning this," she said softly. "They're calling it a setup." Harry didn't answer. His reflection did. The man in the mirror looked back at him, not as a prince, not as a husband or a son, but as a man who had lost control of his own story. "I was ambushed," he said under his breath. "Were you?" the publicist asked quietly. Harry turned sharply. "Of course I was." She hesitated, then looked him in the eye. "Or were you just challenged?" He froze. The words hung heavy in the small room. For the first time that night, there was no camera, no audience, no applause to drown out the truth. Just silence, and the echo of what had been said. Meanwhile, out on the studio floor, the energy was changing. The crew whispered among themselves, half in disbelief, half in pride. They'd just captured something that couldn't be scripted, a moment that would live in television history. Director approached Bill. "Network wants to know if you're going to apologize." Bill didn't even look up. For what? For making a prince walk off live TV. Bill smiled faintly, gathering his notes. "Then they should send me a thank you card. Ratings are about to go through the roof." The assistant hesitated. "You don't think you were too harsh?" Bill paused, looked out at the empty chair still sitting under the bright lights. "No," he said quietly. "I think I was exactly as honest as he wasn't ready for." He set the papers down, turned off his mic, and walked off stage. Bishop's was still buzzing, their phones lighting up with notifications, the echo of applause still humming in the rafters. And there, beneath the fading glow of the blue spotlights, the guest chair remained empty, a throne toppled by truth. By the next morning, the moment had already become legend. Clips flooded every platform. Reaction videos dissected every word. Commentators called it the night the crown cracked under the lights of Hollywood. Some sided with Harry, the fragile exile who'd been cornered by an aggressive American host. Others called it poetic justice, the prince of privilege finally being treated like everyone else. But everyone agreed on one thing. No one had ever seen anything like it. Inside a dimly lit Los Angeles newsroom, anchors prepped for the morning segment. The screen behind them froze on that fateful frame. Prince Harry standing, fury in his eyes. Bill Maher seated calmly, the distance between them thick with meaning. Royal walkout stuns America. Was it bravery or arrogance? The knight's civility died. Or was reborn? The news cycle spun endlessly, feeding on every second of the exchange. For the first time in years, late-night television had gone viral not for comedy, but for confrontation. Silenced, back in his home, Bill watched the rerun alone, cup of black coffee steaming beside him. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply watched, replaying every pause, every inflection, every question. At one point, when the footage showed Harry asking, "Do you know who I am?" Bill let out a soft sigh. "Yeah," he murmured, almost to himself. And that's the problem. His phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from producers, texts from celebrities, even a voicemail from the network head congratulating him for owning the moment. But Bill didn't feel victorious, just steady, like a man who'd held his ground in a storm that others had mistaken for entertainment. He looked out his window toward the fading Los Angeles skyline. "Respect," he said quietly. That's all it ever was about. Meanwhile, across town, Harry sat in a penthouse suite, curtains drawn, the glow of his phone illuminating his face. Headlines scrolled endlessly. Some called him brave, missionary of armed. A few called him broken. He tossed the phone onto the couch and stared out at the Pacific. For the first time since the interview, the quiet hit him. No audience, no applause, no spin. Spinach. And the words he couldn't take back. He replayed the moment in his mind, the way Bill had looked at him, not with hatred, but with disbelief. The kind of disbelief that cuts deeper than anger because it exposes something you've tried to hide. Maybe, he thought, this was what losing control really felt like. Not when the world turns against you, but when the mask slips and you see yourself through their eyes. His wife entered quietly, asking, "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the horizon, the place where old worlds end and new ones begin. By Internet had chosen its one side. Sides, podcasts think, was Bill Maher too cruel? Or was Prince Harry too entitled? Clips were replayed with dramatic music, slow motion, and commentary. Every frame analyzed, every micro-expression interpreted. Some called it theater. Others called it truth. But deep down, everyone knew why it resonated. Because it wasn't really about them. It was about us. About every moment where ego collides with honesty. Where identity crumbles under accountability. Where the stories we tell about ourselves finally meet the people who aren't afraid to question them. 2 days later, Bill returned to his studio. The same stage, the same lights, the same empty chair. The crew prepared as usual, but there was something different. A reverence in the air, as if they were stepping onto sacred ground. Bill took his seat, flipping through his notes. The stage manager counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2. The red light blinked on. Bill looked straight into the camera. "Before we begin," he said, voice calm but firm, "I want to address what happened here last week." Blair went still. "Out before," he continued. "It happens. But what made that moment matter wasn't who walked out. It was why. Because it showed us something we forget too easily. That truth doesn't bow to titles. It doesn't kneel before privilege. It doesn't apologize for being uncomfortable. Refusal rose, hesitant at first, then stronger. Bill's tone softened. America isn't perfect. It never was. But we're built on one idea, that nobody, not even a prince, is above being questioned. And if that makes us loud, so be it. I'd rather live in a country that speaks too much than one where people are afraid to speak at all. Standing ovation. Not for him, but for the idea. That night, as the lights dimmed and the crew packed up, Bill lingered at his desk, staring once more at the empty guest chair. It sat there under the soft blue light, silent, ordinary, almost innocent. But everyone who had been there knew it wasn't just a chair anymore. It was a symbol of confrontation, of pride, of truth spoken out loud. A reminder that no matter how loud applause becomes, silence always remembers the moment it broke. And somewhere out beyond the glare of fame and fury, two men sat on opposite ends of the same truth. Relinquid his crown, the other defending his country. The world had watched them clash, and in that collision, something bigger than both of them had been revealed. Much who they were, but who we all are when the cameras finally stop rolling.